The New York Giants have been very busy over this past week. Yeah, free agency. Well, that's a hectic time. They signed 11 free agents from other teams, and they also retained 5 of their own. Where does their depth chart stand? And how important was it for them to sign veteran cornerback Greg Newsome II? Let's talk about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown live. Hi again, everybody. I'm Paul Dottino. So glad you could join us tonight on the Big Blue Breakdown Live as we basically continue free agency season in the National Football League. Yeah, a whole bunch of guys were signed during week 1. And to some degree, because there are cheaper players being signed right now by many teams, you could call this phase 2. Now, the Giants have been extremely busy over both of the first 2 phases, and yet there are still some interesting veterans out there, guys who may come in at lower prices. And then again, maybe there are veterans who would like to wait until the summertime, wait until training camp starts, wait until after training camp starts so they can come in after missing the first few weeks of practice. Who knows what their plans may be? But there are certainly a couple of spots on this Giants roster that you could make a very strong case that they could use a little bit more depth, a little bit more fortification. But one thing we do know is that the Giants have really done a good job of building some depth and grabbing some, as Parcells would say, hold the fort guys to help out some other rooms that might have been a little thin. And of course, they were able to retain starting right tackle Jermaine Illuminor last week and signed starting middle linebacker Trumaine Edmonds last week as well. And that says nothing about what they did during the course of their special teams shopping spree when they landed kicker Jason Sanders, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, and punter Jordan Stout, who had kicked for the Baltimore Ravens. And then, of course, there was the addition of Isaiah Likely from the Ravens, who will be one of the Giants' 2 starting tight ends, and Patrick Ricard, who, while he is a starting caliber fullback, well, we don't know exactly how many snaps the Giants will give to their fullback position this season, but certainly you can consider Ricard a starter. And then Micah McFadden comes back off of his broken foot. So those are just a bunch of names that have been floated around here over the course of the last week and a half and have made their way into the Giants complex. You got to like what they did at receiver, Darnell Mooney. Now, Mooney's a number 2. He's a very good number 2. I don't see him as a number 1, but he's a very good number 2, having one 1,000-yard season and another one of over 900 yards. He's a very good number 2. And that bodes well for them because they also signed Calvin Austin off of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mooney, of course, coming from the Falcons after a stay with the Chicago Bears. Now, those 2 receivers were very important because it enhances the wide receiver room, especially if there is any delay in the return of Malik Nabers. But this is stuff that you guys already have figured out as we have seen them go through the first week and a half of free agency. Coming up in just a little bit, at about 8:15, we are going to go out to Cleveland. And we're going to talk to a gentleman who has been covering the Cleveland Browns for nearly 20 years. He is basically their radio beat guy of the all sports flagship station 92.3 FM, TheFan in Cleveland. He has a whole lot to tell us about Greg Newsome II, a veteran corner who the Giants reportedly signed, again, for a 1-year prove-it deal at $8 million. Now, we know, by the way, that the Giants had to do something with their cornerback position. And a draft that has some depth at corner, has some quality make-it cornerback players, but no real blue-chip superstars. I think we would all agree. I mean, there'll be a couple guys taken in the first round, no question. I mean, that goes without saying. But the way the situation looks for the Giants right now, if they're going to draft a corner, that corner is going to have to come along a little bit slowly, because you're looking at Mansour Delane out of LSU, Avion Terrell out of Clemson, Colton Hood out of Tennessee. Jamad McCoy out of Tennessee would have been probably the number one corner taken in this year's draft had he not suffered a serious injury. And that's a shame because, yeah, without that ACL tear, yeah, he would have been the number one corner taken in this year's draft. McCoy, he's really, really good. And then there's Chris Johnson of San Diego State. Another interesting corner. But you see, none of these guys, at least by most draftniks, have the value of the 5th overall pick in the draft. What the Giants have done over the last week and a half, they've reinforced their roster to the point where they could take the best player available at number 5 and not really weigh positional need. Really, seriously, folks, the positional need, the Giants have done enough that they could just take the guy, and they should, by the way, take the guy who has the biggest long-term impact on the franchise. And you know the funny part? In one way, the Giants can't lose. It's a win-win. Because let's just say that they get on the board at number 5. And Tate, the wide receiver, is there. Styles, the linebacker, is there. They'll undoubtedly be, if depending upon, again, what's going on with the other Ohio State blue chipper, there's a really good chance that Downs, the safety, is going to be there. You will probably have at least 2 of those 3 outstanding Ohio State prospects on the board at 5, in all likelihood. And you can't go wrong picking any one of those 3. If you wanted to go to Bain out of Miami, which some people think he belongs there, you probably can. If you really wanted to push up Fano or Mananoa, one of the 2 top offensive linemen, if you really wanted to push them up there, you certainly could. I suspect the Giants are looking more for a guard than they are a tackle. Now, do they think one of those 2 tackles are going to be Pro Bowl level guards for the next 10 years? Well, if they do, you could understand why they might want to take one of them at 5. But if you think that they're just solid NFL tackles, then the value at 5 isn't there. But we don't know what the Giants are thinking. And we don't know if they truly believe that either one of those 2 guys can be a Pro Bowl guard. Of course, there's also Jeremiah Love, the best running back in this draft. I don't think he is worth the 5th pick for me. That doesn't mean the Giants might think otherwise, but I don't think so, because to take him takes away snaps from Scatterboo and Tracy, and that's almost counterproductive if you ask me. Those are two of their better offensive skill position players, and drafting someone that takes snaps from them, no matter how good he may be, doesn't give you the net effectiveness that you could get by taking one of the stud wide receivers. Anyway, here's my point. The Giants are in a wonderful position to get the best player available at 5. Here's the other side to the coin. No matter who they take, there's going to be a bunch of media and a bunch of fans very, very angry. If they take Styles, there'll be people angry they didn't take Tate or they didn't take Downs. If they take Downs, there'll be angry people saying you didn't take Styles and you didn't take Tate. It won't matter. You see, even though it's a win-win and they're practically guaranteed to get a universally liked, really terrific prospect, because there are so many choices and so many options, there are guaranteed to be factions that will hate the pick. And I know just from doing Big Blue Kickoff Live during the day and from doing this show at night, I know for a fact there are people out there pounding the table for Love. There are people pounding the table for Bain. There are people pounding the table for Downs. There are others pounding the table for Styles. That's just the way it is. And because there are probably going to be, 4 or 5 legitimate choices at 5 for the Giants, you run the risk of 80% of the fans being unhappy because you didn't take the one guy they wanted. So I prepare you for this now. On March 18th, with the draft a full month away, the Giants will be in a position to take a very strong impact player who could help the franchise for years to come. And I already know that no matter who they take, because there are so many legit options, there are going to be a lot of angry fans. Disappointed and or angry. That's going to happen. There's no way they can avoid it. Incredible, isn't it? Even when you win, you lose. But the proof will be in the pudding when the guy that they take has the kind of impact that they believe. Hey, what do you know? Look at this already. Tutu is back. Hey, my man. And we say, thank you for your return, Tutu. Yeah. Very generous, as always. As Tutu comes back, massive respect to Big Paulie, the king of New York Giants podcast and media. Greetings from all my family. Greetings from me and all my family in Princeton, Jersey. Brilliant live show. Cheers, mate. So the Italian rugby team is in Princeton. How about that? Apologies, Tutu, for the chilly weather. I don't know what you were expecting, but it is chilly. I'm not even sure if it got to 40 degrees today in New Jersey. It was clear and sunny, but the wind was whipping pretty good. And, well, I don't think you really want to know that, like, a week and a half ago, it was, I believe, 82. Ooh. I am sorry about that. But Tutu, again, as always, appreciate your generosity. And thank you so much for being a super chat man here on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Now, before I get to your chats, it is already 8:15. I'd like to get to our guest for this evening. Talked to him just a little while ago, had great insight, and I figured you guys would really enjoy hearing from him too, because there seems to be some debate amongst the national media and even some of the reports out of the New York papers as they try to figure out everything they can about Greg Newsome. There seems to be a little bit of a hot and cold, a little bit of a skepticism as to how does Greg Newsome II fit into the Giants depth chart. Is he automatically a starter? Is he fighting for a starting job? We still don't know what John Harbaugh thinks about Tay Banks and if he can get him to play like he's supposed to, or if he can get Paulson Adebo to play like he's supposed to after a subpar year following his signing from the New Orleans Saints. In any event, the Giants now have 3 corners on their roster who have experience in the National Football League and have put, at least in Tay Banks' case, at least one good season of football on film. Adebo's done more than that. So has Greg Newsome. So Newsome reportedly gets a 1-year deal worth $8 million, which indicates they certainly expect him to challenge for a starting job. Now, he does have the ability to play man. He does have the ability to play zone. He can play outside. He can play inside. He's done everything during his career, so quality player. Now, to some, Newsome has been a solid NFL starter. To others, he's been too inconsistent to be counted on. Newsome's a 6-foot corner. He's 195 pounds, got size, got some length. He was the Browns' first-round draft pick out of Northwestern in 2021. So he's completed 5 seasons in the league. He immediately became a starter in Cleveland. They put him opposite Denzel Ward. They expected those 2 guys to be a terrific tandem for years to come. And he did help solidify the secondary. First couple of years, it looked like it was a great pairing with those 2 guys in the defensive backfield. But after 4.5 seasons, and there were some ups and downs and some extenuating circumstances in there, the Browns shipped Newsome to the Jaguars in October, and then the Jaguars, they played a soft zone. They decided not to sign him at the end of the year and set him free, where the Giants grabbed him last week. Daryl Ruiter of 92.3, the fan in Cleveland, again with 2 decades of experience covering the Cleveland Browns, had some very strong opinions about Newsome's time in Cleveland. So I asked Ruiter exactly why did the Browns part ways with the veteran corner?
Well, the contract certainly was a major factor in the decision of Andrew Berry to trade him to Jacksonville for Tyson Campbell. Now, I do feel like Tyson Campbell came in and seamlessly fit at the time what then defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz was doing defensively as far as using players in man-to-man coverage. Tyson Campbell, part of the reason he was struggling in Jacksonville was because of being asked to play a lot of zone, and he was more of a man-to-man guy. But specifically for Greg, yes, the contract was a big factor. He was going into a free agent year. You were talking about anywhere from 15 to 20 million in annual value for a contract. From a team building roster management standpoint, I don't know that the Browns were in position to be able to pay Greg what he was expecting his market value to be. And so that all factored in, and you got a player in return from Jacksonville who's under team control for an additional 3 to 4 seasons. Whereas again, Greg Williams would be going into the second contract, or Newsome, I should say, would be going into that second contract, and he would be making more money. So money was a very big factor, both from a cap standpoint and a cash standpoint, why the Browns ultimately decided to trade Greg Newsome.
Now, before we go back through his time with Cleveland, let me just go strictly to the first half of last year before the trade. There seemed to be some varying opinions as to how well he was playing because there has been over the course, again, we'll talk about his career, some ups and downs.
Yeah.
How was he playing at the time of the deal? Because when he did go to Jacksonville, obviously they weren't all that happy with him because they didn't re-sign him. But I've already talked to Greg, who told me that changing coordinators, changing schemes, changing systems, he never felt comfortable there. And so that kind of looks like just a lost half a year for me in terms of his perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold that half season in Jacksonville against him. You know, his body of work in Cleveland, from my standpoint, I thought was very strong. I don't feel like he's a number one corner. I think he's a number two or a nickel, but he's a very good, above average, in my view, number two or nickel corner. The thing here in Cleveland too is he didn't want to be a nickel corner. He wanted to play on the outside more rather than being asked to play inside. And there were because of injuries, because of just the roster and situation, he was the number two corner behind Denzel Ward. And so they were asking him to play outside quite a bit. Now, there were some times where he struggled a little bit playing outside, but again, I thought he was more than adequate working in the secondary, whether he was inside or he was outside. Again, I was a real big fan of him as a player, big fan of him as a person. When you play corner, and this covering the NFL, Paul, you're on an island, and you're either the hero or the GOAT, right? There's no real in between, right? You either break up the pass or you give up a big play. And that's just the way she goes. And I really thought that Greg handled the giving up the big play and bouncing back and not allowing that to affect him on the next snap. I thought he handled it pretty well. Yeah, he gave up some big plays. Every cornerback in the National Football League will give up big plays. For me, it's how do you respond? How do you bounce back from that? And again, I really think that Greg does a good job of, when he does get hit for a big gain, he gets right back up. And he's not afraid to take the chance on making the appropriate or the big play on the next snap that comes to him.
I wonder if part of the disappointment from those Browns fans or those in the organization who thought that maybe Newsome didn't live up to his potential will say, well, based on your grade, he's a number two corner, but we drafted him in the first round.
Right.
I know it was late in the first round, but do you think that played partly into their perception of him as to not living up fully to maybe the maximum potential that they thought he had?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, he's in the same secondary as Denzel Ward, who's a perennial All-Pro and Pro Bowl
no doubt
player. Okay, and he, in my view, I feel if Denzel keeps playing at the level he's playing, and if he's able to add the longevity to his career, he should merit consideration for the Hall of Fame at some point down the road. And again, I realize that's saying a lot. Long way to go before you get to that conversation. But last year, teams weren't even throwing to Denzel Ward's side of the field. That's how much respect they had for him. Almost like Daryl Revis, right, with the Jets, Revis Island. Sure. Teams just didn't even want to chance it, right? And that's what was happening. So Greg would get picked on a little bit. But Greg wasn't being picked on because he was a bad football player. He was playing opposite of Denzel Ward, whom teams just didn't even want to bother with. And so I think that kind of gets lost in the discourse when it comes to Greg Newsome. And it wasn't that the Browns, at least from what I've heard, it wasn't that the Browns didn't value Greg Newsome or they didn't feel that he was, worth, the money he potentially could be asking for. It was just, we're paying Denzel Ward a whole lot of money. We're paying Myles Garrett a whole lot of money. We're paying a whole lot. Like, here's the thing about the Cleveland Browns. They might not win a lot, but they pay very, very well. Money is no object. They light tens of millions of dollars a year on fire, okay, on an annual basis. So, yes, their financial consideration, obviously, right? do you want to pay Greg Newsome what you would consider number one cornerback money to retain him? Probably not. Like, that just doesn't make a lot of fiscal sense. But, you know, the Browns ended up changing things this offseason, right? They've got a new defensive coordinator. So, you know, Jim Schwartz didn't get the head coaching job, so he told them in a very Jim Schwartz way, thanks, but no thanks as far as staying on as the defensive coordinator. You can color in the lines, and I encourage you to do so. But, you know, I don't know if, you know, Greg would even still fit here under new defensive coordinator, Mike Rutenberg, right? Hopefully Rutenberg, who retained most of the coaching staff on that side of the ball, continues to do what the Browns did defensively from a schematic standpoint. He said he's going to try and do a lot of it, but, you know, I think it just got to a point financially and maybe even from a little bit of a team building direction that Greg no longer fit here. And Greg understood the business too. Like, he understood, I think, being traded in that spot. You know, and they got a very good player for him. Okay. It's, you know, it's not like they traded Greg Newsome for a 5th round draft pick. They traded him for Tyson Campbell, who stepped in to replace him as a starter on the defense. And Tyson played pretty well last year. So, like, let's not act like the Browns gave up on Greg Newsome. The Browns gave away Greg Newsome. I don't think that was the case. I just think that the business of football really kind of stepped in here.
All right, so we will hear more from Browns insider Daryl Ruiter coming up in just a little bit. I'm going to get to your chats, so hopefully your questions, your comments. We'll play some more of Daryl Ruiter in just a bit. He's got more details on exactly not only Newsome's situation, which we just kind of cleared up, and clearly he believes Newsome was more of a salary cap issue with Cleveland than a playing issue, which I think is very interesting because there are a lot of Cleveland fans who have not necessarily treated Newsome very well and have been down on him. Some of the media has too. But again, if you're all rookie in your first NFL season, and then you don't make a Pro Bowl after that, they're looking at that as a regression, perhaps. But we're hearing a lot from Ruiter, Daryl Ruiter, who is giving us a firsthand look and insight into Newsome. He will tell us more about Newsome as a player, not just the circumstances and situation surrounding his move from Cleveland to Jacksonville and now ultimately to the Giants. Now, Tudo is back again, and he hits us up again. And, of course, thank you a second time to Tudo. He says, let's see here. Paulie, not the entire team, mate. Only me with my family back home. I live here, mate. It's where I grew up. We have a month off, that's all. God's blessings, mate. And to you, Tudo, as well. I must have misunderstood. I was unaware that you are a homegrown New Jersey pride, born and bred from the Garden State. So thank you. Appreciate the information. Appreciate the second super chat of the night as well. And more importantly, safe travels and good health to you as you have your month off. And when you get back to your team, I hope you're well rested and everything goes terrific for you. Now, in the meantime, we will have to go back to our chats. And again, folks, if you want to make a phone call or a video call, there's the QR code up in the corner of the screen. If you want to use your cell phone, or the crawler on the bottom of the screen has exactly where you would need to log in if you wanted to join the program with some live conversation. James O'Keefe, one of our regulars, NY2TC. Good evening, Paul. Same to you. Nature2333 says, Big Blue, good evening, Paul. Back at you. Iman Perry, one of our other regulars. Good evening, and back to you. Same thing to Aiden Fink, says everyone watching as well. He says, I hope Harlem X calls in here tonight because Evan Neal is back in the building. Yes, that was one of the moves the Giants did make last week. They did re-sign Evan Neal, minimum contract, at least according to the reports. And John Harbaugh and this new coaching staff obviously thinking to themselves, there are very few men of that size, frame, and power who are able to play football at a professional level. And so they are giving him another lease on life and another chance here with the New York Giants. We have not had the opportunity as media to speak to the Giants coaching staff, as I have no doubt told you at least 1,000 times since John Harbaugh was hired. So we do not know. Does Harbaugh and his people think that Neal should be the backup tackle, the backup swing tackle, maybe behind Illuminor and Thomas? Or do they think he should be competing as the starting right guard? Or do they think he's a backup guard, backup tackle? What do they think? We don't know. And, for everyone who wants to be critical of that signing, I think it's important to hear from Harbaugh and his staff what they saw and what they think and what their plans are for Evan Neal before anybody questions it. Because if the reports are true and it's a minimum deal, well, then it's low risk, high reward. If they can find a way to tap into Evan Neal's ability and get him to be a somewhat, he doesn't even have to be the player he was drafted at, because when you're drafted in the top 10, you're expected to virtually be a Pro Bowl player. But if they could just get him to be a legitimate contributor on this team, well, then that's absolutely worth it. It's not even debatable. So let's see if we can find out what the plans are for Evan Neal before anybody poo-poos that signing. James O'Keefe says, you think GVR, that's Greg Van Roten, gets signed, or do we go after another veteran offensive lineman? Again, James, that's a great question. We don't know if this staff wants Van Roten back. Van Roten told a number of us, including myself, at the end of the season that he did plan on coming back for at least another year and that he'd love to stay with the Giants because he's originally from Long Island. And this is the reason why 2 years ago he put off retirement and signed with the Giants, because he wanted to be close to home. And the Giants were a great fit for him. Remember, he had already had a cameo with the Jets prior, and he wasn't going back there. So it turns out, not only does he sign with the Giants as an emergency backup, he turns out he's the starter and starts every single game for 2 straight seasons and has been the most consistent Giants offensive lineman over the past 34 games. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. But as he said, because he didn't play a lot early in his career, he feels he's got young legs. So, who knows? We don't know. But if the Giants do go out, I mean, they've got Stinney, they've got Azudu, they've got potentially Neal, and they've got Jake Kubas right now. And then obviously they also have John Runyon, who is penciled in as the starting left guard. But those are the guys right now who, if they don't do anything else, and believe me, they'll do something else, but those are the guys competing. I suspect the Giants will draft a potential right guard competitor or prospect, if you will, at some point. I don't know if it'll be first or second round. It might wind up being the 4th round or the 5th round, because there are guys that will be available in the 4th round who can compete. That we've heard. There's a lot of interior offensive linemen in this draft that are not necessarily sexy and won't be drafted high, and you'll be able to get them in the middle rounds. So let's see how that all shakes down. All right, before we get to any more chats, we do have a phone call. Actually, it's a video call. Aiden and the rest of you who are loyal followers of this show will be extremely happy to know that Harlem X is joining the program. How are you, my friend?
You guys are terrible. Okay. Okay. Hey, how y'all doing? How's it going, Paul? I'm sorry, I was laying down.
No, it's all good. And you should know that many people who are partaking in this show on a weekly basis consistently ask for your participation.
I don't get it, but okay, I mean, I was laying down, minding my business, listening to the show, and Aiden mentioned something. Oh, y'all making me do this. Okay, all right, okay. Well, yeah, I did have Evan Neal on the brain, and just so you know, Paul and everybody else, John Harbaugh has been listening to me because I got a feeling that he probably is going to test. There is no way you're going to tell me you re-signed Evan Neal, and conveniently Patrick Ricard, who just so happens to be 300 some odd pounds, is going to be the fullback. Nah, come on, man. That was my idea. No, I'm not trying to hear that. He heard what I was saying. Yeah, they're not slick because wait a minute. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it was Evan Neal. I'm not sure if it was him, but wasn't he the guy when he was a rookie, when he was coming out in the draft, recorded a video of him jumping out of a pool?
I do not remember that, Harlem X.
I swear,
jumping out of a pool?
Yeah, just standing up in the pool and jumping straight up out of the pool and showing how much leg strength he had.
While you're discussing this, I will take a gander at the internet and see if that, in fact, is somewhere to be found.
Because if that was him, then I mean that's going to add more fuel to me taking him out of that offensive line position and making him a fullback. And if you really truly want to go heavy with it, make him Patrick Ricard fullback. He on one side, he's fullback on the other side. Scatterboo in the back of the both of them, as running back, and had offensive line up front. And just make that out. We run that play. We run just straight up a draw, a power, for like 17 straight plays to wear everybody down. Then bring the rest of the offense on. You let them get their rest. I'm serious. No one else is doing that. And I mean, they got Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter with the Ravens, after they get all worn down, and Derrick. So I say, let's just go 100% with it. Patrick Ricard, Evan Neal, Cam Scatterboo, 15 straight plays. Wear you completely out. Then we bring the offense back on the field. We play regular football. Now watch. If they do something like that, I want a paycheck from the Giants. I'm not even playing. I'm sick of this. Man.
All right. Now, I have found on YouTube the video before Neal was drafted of him doing a jump from a standard stance, splitting his legs and jumping onto the top of two large cushioned boxes that have got to be at least 4 feet high.
All right, I didn't see that.
If not more.
Yeah, so he's trying to show that he has leg strength. So, I mean,
no question, leg strength and agility. And that is obvious in the video. I don't see anything that particularly has him jumping into a pool or out of a pool, though.
I don't know who that was. I could have sworn it was him. Okay, my mistake. But okay. I'm gonna probably make some people mad with this one.
There is, by the way, there is something on what do you call it? AI, and we know that that's not always correct. They are saying there is a video that includes him leaping from inside a pool onto a pool deck, but I don't see it.
No, this was before the whole AI. This was that wasn't an AI video. That was even on.
No, AI is claiming that such a video does exist, but I don't see the video. Is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm not suggesting that the video is AI. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see. Hold on. Here is another one. Oh, it's a TikTok video. Hold on. It's a TikTok video, and it says Evan Neal box jump out of a pool. I'm looking, and I still don't see the actual video itself, but it does say that it was done. I just don't see it. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look it up later, but yeah, but like I'm gonna make some people mad about this. I'm probably the only Giants fan that actually doesn't have a problem with Joe Shane. I really don't. I mean, he has the attitude that I've been looking for with a Giants GM. I got a lot of things to say about the whole GM thing, but when it comes to Joe Shane, I think I heard Patricia Traynor call him Trader Joe, and I could have sworn I heard her say, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I could have sworn I heard her say that he said in a press conference that he wanted to be able to make at least one big move in free agency every year. We needed that kind of mentality with a GM for a long time with the Giants. And whatever moves he made, here is why I say I don't have a problem with him. And here's why I say I got a lot to say about the GM position. And this goes for all teams.
Right.
Why? Why is the GM getting heat for the players that they bring in when that should be the coach's responsibility? The coach is the one who has to do all the stuff with the players. The GM should be look, you're the GM. You cut the checks. You do all the math. You do all that stuff. You do the team organization. Let me draft the player. If I'm coach, I got to be coach. I got to be a teacher. I got to work with these guys. Why am I not drafting them? That's why it makes me crazy when I hear people talk about, well, this GM comes in and that quarterback, he didn't draft them, so he has no connection with him. Who cares what connection you got? You're not the one coaching the guy. You know, if you're the GM, you're in the office. You know, you're the GM. Stay in the office. That's not your job.
The reason that people say that is because the assumption is that the GM's track record, because no GM is going to stay with a team for his whole career. It just doesn't happen, right? Well, GMs are going to bounce around to several teams before their career is through. And the assumption is that when GMs draft a guy first, second, third round, and whatever their general overall consensus draft grade is, that's something that they will take and be a part of their legacy for many years to come as they continue to bounce around through the latter stages of their career. And most people think that a GM has such an ego regarding that facet of their resume that they will always give extra time, have extra patience, and do whatever they can to make their first round picks, especially, try to work out that, you know what, they'll be the last ones to admit that a first round pick was a miss. And that's the common perception.
Yeah, and it makes absolutely no sense. Listen, if I'm married, I'm the one going grocery shopping. I go get some really nice, I go get some really, what I think are nice groceries, bring them back home. The wife cooks them up. 5-star meal, Michelin level, whatever.
Okay.
I'm going around telling everybody, hey, you see them nice apples I bought? No, dummy. I'm not doing all the stuff. I'm not, that just makes no sense. That's like you don't spend the rest of your career with it. You are the one you control contracts. You control team management. Everything player-wise, if they come to you with a complaint, I get it. But seriously, no, that makes no sense. I mean, you do not shop for the groceries. Those are my groceries to deal with. I'm the coach because I got to sit there and make a plate out of all of that. You just basically handle, the business side and all that other stuff. We come to you, we want a certain free agents. I'm going to tell you, go get this free agent, that free agent, this free agent. Draft this guy because those are the guys I have to work with. They don't have to work with anybody. So what? I don't understand why people put all this on a GM. Like, you're a terrible GM because
it's really a two-way street. Yes, I understand your point, and I don't think enough credence is given to the point that you're making, that the GM builds the roster. You've got a bunch of scouts and personnel guys who are paid an awful lot of money to acquire the information necessary to make a logical decision. So once those decisions are made, and there's a lot of time and investment and manpower hours that goes into acquiring all of that stuff that goes into the folder before the player is picked. But once that player is picked, it is now up to the coaching staff to make sure that player is coached up properly to get the potential out of him. So you are right. There are many times where either the player failed on his own or the coaching staff failed him. And as a result, the GM gets ripped because the player did not work out, and it really wasn't the GM's fault. You are absolutely right. That does happen. But there are also times where the personnel department made a mistake, the GM made a mistake, they put the player on the roster, and then the coach says, guys, I don't know if you realize this, but he's really not very good. And I could do whatever I can do, and it's not going to be enough to get this guy to play up to the level that we need. That does happen too.
And that should be 100% on the coach's shoulders, not the GM. Yeah.
Sometimes it's on the coach's shoulders, and sometimes it is, again, on the GM. When the GM brings in a guy who it becomes quite obvious. I'll give you a great example, right? Many years ago, the highest draft choice in my 43 years of covering the Giants that did not make it out of training camp was a third-round pick named Greg Mark many years ago during the Parcells era. He was out of the Miami Hurricane system, and he was drafted in the third round. He was a defensive tackle. He was undersized. The Giants personnel people drafted Greg Mark. They gave him to Parcells, and they told Parcells, you know what? We put a third-round draft grade on him. We drafted him. We think you're going to be able to use him. And the thought was he might be able to convert to linebacker, which is something that Harry Carson did when he first came to the Giants, as you may remember. Well, turned out Greg Mark got cut and didn't even get to opening day. Third-round draft choice. And it was apparent from the very first practice when he stepped on the field, he was not good enough to play in the NFL. And he was a total flameout. The Giants got rid of him. I think he might have had a cup of coffee with somebody else, but didn't do anything and was out of the league in a heartbeat. Yeah. Well, in that case, it was the Giants personnel people who made the mistake. Clearly, they screwed up. They took a player who did not have what it took to play in this league, and they needed Parcells to get him on the field and to tell them, this guy needs to go. You got to get him out of here. I can't use him.
Is that, you know what? And that pretty much is probably the reason why Bill Parcells went in that interview and said, when he was with the Cowboys, and said something about him buying a grocery. I cannot remember exactly.
He was with the Patriots. That's when he left the Patriots. He said, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to do the cooking, I got to buy the groceries, something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes with what I'm saying, man. Like, I mean, don't. And to go against what I was saying, that was basically like caveman days. You go out and just kill a cow or something and just slap it down on the table, hey, cook it and walk away, and they get blamed if the cow was all spoiled or something. No, that just doesn't make any sense.
All right,
man.
I appreciate the sentiment, but again, Howlem X, I can honestly tell you it cuts both ways.
I know.
Let me ask you this. Of the free agents the Giants brought in, let me ask you two questions. Of the guys they brought in, who was your favorite signing? And in general, it could also be, I'll give you a second question. It could be your favorite player of the free agent period for the Giants. It could be a guy that they re-signed and kept. So if you can answer both of those questions before I let you go.
My favorite son. Jeez. Honestly, I'm kind of, people are going to get mad at me with this one. I'm kind of mad they let Wandell go, but my favorite son, it has to be Tremaine Edmonds.
Yes.
Because I think that was a Joe Shane, and because wasn't they trying to go after him last year too?
He's a former Buffalo Bill, and there were some rumblings in the media that the Giants had been interested in him prior.
Yes, I'm glad they got him. And as far as us re-signing, I am not a fan of our offensive line, man. I am not. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm not, because I remember watching a few games last year, this season, where it was a couple guards, somebody just ran straight by him and they arms at their side and just watching them. I'm not a fan of this line. I'm really not. So I'm not excited about this line at all. I mean, Andrew Thomas is there, yeah, but I think they're dragging their feet on some good ideas, and I don't know. I'm waiting to see what happens, but I'm not really as far as re-signing.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think bringing back right tackle Jermaine Illuminor was a very important piece. And that is my favorite re-signing. I'm sorry.
I've never liked him. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You
don't have to like him. You don't have to like him. It's okay.
And one last thing, like I said this a few times already. This season coming up is not the season for Giants fan to get our hopes up like we're back. No, we're not. This is the feel out season. We're putting the pieces together. If we do good, that's fine. Get excited. If we do bad, that's fine. Be hurt. Everything is normal, but don't feel like we're back to ourselves. No. It's 2027 is when you start feeling that way, because we just got to put the pieces together and get a feel for things now, because the Giants doing something right now that I've been complaining that they needed to do for decades. They ripped everything out, root and branches. No more of this in-house crap and bringing in dead pieces. Now they doing something completely fresh and bringing in everything new. So this is going to be a big learning curve for the whole team this year. So even if we win, and I know I'm going to sound ridiculous with this, even if we win the Super Bowl, that's fool's gold, because we can easily end up with a top 3 pick. We can easily end up with messed up in 2027 with that. So no, this season, feel good about what's going on right now, but please do not start bragging to your friends that the Giants are back this season coming up. It's not going. We're not. 2027, I guarantee you, that's when we're back. I'm telling you right now.
All right, Harlem X. I appreciate your time tonight. We'll talk to you again soon, all right?
All right, everybody. So y'all, I'm going back to laying down. All right, y'all.
You be good. Harlem X, always a pleasure to have him join the program. Sometimes I think he's a little off the rails with his thoughts, but we have a great conversation anyway, and that's perfectly okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? We've got Armand Duda, who comes back and says, the Giants did a lot more in phase 1 than I thought they would. Glad to see it. And X-Man 0071 says, I'm not sure. It says everything Paul. Explode everything? I'm not sure exactly what he means there. But we will continue to move on. We got a Jets fan here in the chat room, but no sense in wasting time with those thoughts. Armand says, Harlem X was my first thought when I heard Neil was resigned. Armand also says, Delane would be my first choice at corner. And yeah, I mean, of the healthy corners, it is widely assumed he is the number 1 corner in the draft. I don't know that anyone believes he's a top 5 player. And, again, this whole equation of weighing best player available against need. And, I really think the best player available has to take a much, much, much higher piece of consideration for the Giants, because they have done a lot to fortify several areas of the roster where they no longer have gaping holes. Now, there are some thin spots. Yes, there are some spots where the depth is certainly in question. But in terms of gaping holes to say, hey, there's a position on the 22 where they don't have anybody who could possibly play and do a decent job, I mean, unless you want to say right guard, okay, you could say that, I suppose, but I don't see any true gaping holes on the 22 right now. That doesn't mean that they're a finished product, and it doesn't mean that they're going to the playoffs. Let me stress that again. They're not a finished product, and they're not automatically going to the playoffs. But the point is, right now, as it stands in mid to late March, the New York Giants have done a good enough job of fortifying their current roster so that they don't have to go into the draft desperate to fill a particular gaping hole where they are bleeding out. They don't really have that situation right now. The closest situation to having a legitimate hole is the right guard spot. But we don't know what they've got planned for that. They may already have a plan in place. They may know who they're bringing in. They may know Van Roten is coming back. And after having 2 solid years, I have no problem saying if Greg Van Roten does return, he's the starting right guard, and he'll be good enough again for the 3rd season in a row. I have no problem saying that. I would like to see them acquire depth at some other spots. There's no question about that. But things are obviously looking up and in the right direction so that they won't have to go into the draft starving for an immediate starter at any position. That's the key. All right. Let's see. James O'Keefe is asking Tudo to be the Giants international player on the roster. X-Man, 0071. I would draft linebacker Sonny Styles with the 5th pick. If he is gone, I would trade back. I would try and stay in the top 12 and then either draft a cornerback, safety, or guard and pick up more draft picks. That, of course, is certainly an option. The question becomes in this draft, and if you've listened to all the draft nicks over the course of the last several weeks and at the combine, this is not a draft where people are looking to trade up. You usually trade up to get a quarterback. Most people don't trade up for any other position that high in the 1st round because of the premium price you have to pay to get up there. That's just not usually the way it goes. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but that usually doesn't go that way. And so to get a team to make a deal with you is probably going to be very difficult. That's why for me, I just say pick the best player available, the guy who you believe will have the highest impact for the most number of years on your roster. Just take that guy, whoever that guy is, and that's the right answer because you can justify that logic. And it doesn't matter who wanted another player or another position. You can justify the selection if you believe that that player will have the highest impact for the most number of years on your team. That automatically defines who the number 5 pick should be. And that is the only definition that truly is logical and accurate. Let's keep going. Queensboro brother says, James, they can't afford. Tudo. I'm sorry. It's Tudo who says to James, they can't afford me, mate. I make a living breaking men. I was born ready. My purse is bigger than any highest paid quarterback, mate. Queensboro brothers in there and says hi to all the Giants fans. He's one of our other regulars. A lot of discussion going on between some of our loyal viewers. Armand Duda says, I can see the jokes now when we play the Jaguars next season. Welcome to Jacksonville. Jacksonville travels to Jacksonville. Boy. Armand, that was very cornball. Oh, my. Let's see here. And a lot of people greeting Tudo, who was one of our favorites and our regulars. And I think it's time we get back to our interview with Browns insider Daryl Ruiter of 92.3 FM, The Fan in Cleveland, beat reporter on the Browns for more than 20 years. We continue our conversation about former Browns cornerback Greg Newsome, who was traded to the Jaguars in October, became a free agent and has signed with the Giants. Now, Newsome admits to having some ups and downs during the course of his career with the Browns. They slid him to the inside, to the slot. They played him on the boundary, but he was always at his best when he played press coverage. Broke in to the NFL and made the NFL all-rookie team right out of the box. He was a press corner on the outside, which is where he believes his strengths are and what he likes to play the most. So then when they started to jostle him around because they didn't have anybody to play the slot really well, he did what he had to do for the sake of the team. But it didn't necessarily allow Newsome to be the kind of dominant boundary corner that he was hoping to be. He was solid, but his overall upside, in part because he had been switched around a lot, apparently did not totally meet the Browns nor their fans' expectations. And so finally, they wound up trading him to Jacksonville this past October. We've already heard Daryl Ruiter talk about how the contract, remember, Newsome was in his fifth year. They picked up his fifth-year option, and he was going to become an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season anyway. And the Browns knew it would take a big chunk of money to sign him, and they really did not have that based on their cap condition. So I basically asked Ruiter for his perspective as to exactly how things worked out for Newsome in terms of his play, his potential, his style. Let's get a listen.
No, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. When you are a first-round pick, right, automatically big things are expected of you. And, I, as someone who has been and continues to be very critical of the Browns draft results over the years, and it's a big reason why the franchise has struggled to put together a consistent winner. They had a good draft last year, but I would not put Greg Newsome in the bust category. I wouldn't put him in.
Okay.
I would not put him in, the bust bucket, if you will, of failed first round draft picks of the Browns. No, because I disagree with that. Just because he didn't get the second contract here, that doesn't mean he wasn't a good player here. Now, what was he good enough to warrant the $15 to $20 million a year? Yeah, I think that there's a conversation to be had there. But again, that doesn't make him a bad football player, right? I think we get caught in between sometimes when we're evaluating guys, right? They're either great or they stink and you should cut them, right? And Greg doesn't stink. I wouldn't say that Greg is great. I would say Greg is very good. And again, I feel like he is a number two, not so much a number one coverage corner.
So during his first 3 years with the Browns, right? So he's a starter the whole time, but he also played some slot, right? Played some of the nickel stuff,
Yeah.
in addition to being outside, out of team necessity, as I understood it, correct?
Yeah.
So that says something about him being a good team guy, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's a very good team guy. He's, in my view, I think he's very versatile. Now, again, his desire, and this led to a little friction, because he recognized if he wanted to get paid and maximize his value, he needed to play outside. Okay?
Of course.
Nickel corners and dime corners are not getting $15 to $20 million. Okay?
No chance.
Right. So there was, I think, a little internal friction there. But that, again, that's business. That's football, right? That didn't make Greg a bad guy. He knew that for him to maximize his value, he needed to play outside. He needed to play well outside, but he needed the opportunity to show that he could play well consistently on the outside. And just circumstances with the Browns, being the Browns, and not just the Browns thing, but just around the NFL, injuries pop up all the time. And unfortunately, at points during Greg's tenure here in Cleveland, injuries reared their ugly head in the Browns secondary. And so, yeah, he was forced to bounce inside, outside. 1 week he's inside, next week he's outside type thing. And I think he had a pretty good attitude about it. I think he did a good job containing maybe some of his frustration with, not getting to play outside all the time. But also at the same time, he made sure it didn't affect his play on the field. And he made sure that it did not, pass along any negative energy like within the locker room. Because all my interactions with Greg, for the most part, outside of having to ask him about losing all the time, relatively positive. And there's no player in the NFL that wants to answer questions about why the team isn't winning. So Again, that's not a Greg thing. That's you play for the Browns, and the Browns just are having another one of their bad years. And so we have to, as a former first-round pick and one of the spokesmen of the team, we have to ask you these questions that aren't exactly of a very positive nature. And again, I think Greg did a pretty good job, trying to represent the team. But there was a year I actually put him down as a nominee for our locker room good guy award winner that we hand out. But his frustration about wanting to play outside and having that desire and belief that he can be an elite player on the outside. Again, I don't think that that's something that should be held against him. And, just unfortunately, I think that where the Browns are at, it just didn't fit where they were as a team.
In the last couple of minutes we have, Daryl, let me ask you about his characteristics in terms of him as a player. We know he's a press man corner. Yeah. Is he the kind of guy who's going to wrap up, or is he going to look for the big hit? Is he the kind of guy who's going to get baited on a move and get burned for yards after catch? Or is someone just going to try to blow by him speed-wise? What type of player is he from all the snaps that you were able to see during his career?
Yeah, he will he's not afraid to take risks, and to be a good corner in the NFL, you have to be willing to do that. You have to be able to take those risks and either go for a pick or go for a PBU. And I thought that he handled those pretty well. The way you beat Greg Newsome, from my standpoint, is you beat him with speed. But he himself is pretty quick and agile. I wouldn't say he's like a leading tackler on the team. Okay. I don't exactly want him, coming up a lot on a lot of corner blitzes and things like that, but he's shown the willingness to help out in the run game where needed. He can tackle, but he's also a guy that, likes wants to be in a position where he can make that big, impactful play. And again, I don't view those things as negatives, because when he was with the Browns, he made a lot of plays in the secondary. Not a good catcher of the football, but is from like an interception standpoint. But I just remind folks I always like to say, if cornerbacks could catch footballs, they'd be wide receivers and not cornerbacks. So, and that's just something that the Browns as a team, as a whole, their secondary, not real good catching footballs. Does it very well in practice, by the way. He's very good at catching
really
in practice. Yes, he is. When when they're doing the defensive drills and that, and they try and throw the wonky ball to see if you can adjust to it.
Sure.
He does. Sure. He's great in those drills, right? But I honestly, I would have been happy if the Browns could have re-signed him. But again, I understand why they moved on. But yeah, he's one of those guys that you definitely want in your locker room, and you definitely want him on the field when the game is on the line.
All right, so final question. I guess he's 25 years old right now as the Giants bring him in. It's his third NFL team.
Yeah.
How much more upside is there, do you believe, now that he gets his mind straightened out and wrapped around the fact that he's going to be with the Giants in a prove-it situation?
Yeah, well, and I think that the prove-it contract obviously is, I don't think is something that he was expecting or wanting to deal with this year, and his first quote unquote year of free agency. I think he was looking for a multi-year commitment with significant dollars attached to it, but he'll be motivated, and a motivated Greg Newsome is a very good thing for the New York Giants. He played motivated his last year and a half in Cleveland to try and get them to extend him and show them that he was worthy of the money that at the time he was asking for. So I think you're getting a player that's very much entering the sweet spot, as Browns GM Andrew Berry likes to say, those guys that are coming off that first rookie contract into that second contract. It's usually your mid to late 20s there. Like, he's in the sweet spot. And as far as upside goes, I kind of feel like there isn't much more development for Greg. I think that what he needs professionally is just to be in a stable situation where he can play the same spot every week. Because it really is hard to develop your game when 1 week you're the nickel or the dime, and the next week you're the number 2 working on the side again. You know what I'm saying?
And they did jostle him around that frequently.
Yeah, they did. And so if he can get a stable position or role, right, I think that's where he's going to have the opportunity to really show what he can or can't do, right? I mean, because there's obviously the chance of, he does believe that he can be a quality 3-down outside corner. But, if he goes out there and it's not going right, maybe he is better suited on the inside. But I don't know that there's a tremendous amount more of development that Greg needs. I think it all just comes down to he needs a stable situation and a stable role within a defensive system to just allow him to go out and play some football.
That is Daryl Ruiter of 92.3, the Fan FM in Cleveland. He is the Cleveland Browns beat reporter, has been doing so for nearly 20 years. And I can't tell you how much I thank him for his time today, because once again, there seemed to be a lot of speculation as to, well, what's the deal with Newsome? Former first-round pick. The Browns wound up trading him. Jacksonville wasn't very happy, so obviously they decided to let him go free agent. So how good is this guy? Can he challenge for a starting job? Yeah, well, he's got a 1-year prove-it contract, and it does sound like, based on Daryl's eyewitness account, it does sound like they've got themselves not only a good starter, but a starter who could really solidify the Giants' secondary, not just this year, but for some years to come. So we now go back to your chats and your phone calls or video calls, if you like, and we try to catch up with things as we take you to the bottom of the hour, and we will go a full 90-minute show tonight, folks, of course. I always like if we can get a good guest on who is newsworthy and can provide us with some very good and detailed insight about something that the Giants fans can expect. Well, we try to do that for you. And so I'm very, very glad to be able to talk about Greg Newsome II here this evening. All right, back to our chats. Armand Duda says, I think they'll try for guard with Neal. Not a bad idea given the low cost and lack of depth. We have Mark B. 8365. Paulie, good evening. I like the moves Harbaugh's been making. Are you pleased so far? I think it's very hard not to think that the Giants have done very well, because they have. Again, they have set themselves up so that they don't have a gaping hole in their starting 22 going into the draft. And I'm assuming that they have a plan in place for the right guard spot. That doesn't mean that they won't draft the right guard. They might very well draft one, and it wouldn't surprise me if they do, because I think it's probably a good idea. The question becomes, are they going to draft maybe Fano or Mananoa, one of those 2 guys who are tackles in college who people think are probably top 12 prospects as tackles in the NFL? What if the Giants think that one of those 2 guys is a guaranteed Pro Bowl lock guard? Might they take him at 5? Look, if that's what they do and that's the reason for it, you could understand it. I don't know that I would personally do that, because if you're taking a guy at 5 off of a projection, you're adding a little bit more of a percentage of error, to the pick. And I think at 5, you got to get as sure a thing as you possibly can. I really don't want to leave much room for error when you're taking a guy at 5. That guy at 5 needs to be the real deal. Queensboro brother, one of our regulars, says, happy hump day Wednesday, Paul. Good to see you, my friend. Can't wait to see my Giants on the field. Back at you. Let's see here. James O'Keefe, NY2TC, says Tristan Wirfs did the pool jump. Armand Duda says he had a video of him jumping onto something high, but it wasn't in a pool. And that one, if he did one in a pool, I didn't see it. Armand, that's what I was just talking about Evan Neal. I saw the one where he jumps on the big cushioned boxes, per se. I never saw him do one in a pool. And now James O'Keefe says it was Wirfs who did one in a pool. So honestly, I just don't remember. And I did a quick check on the internet. I could not find anything with Neal in a pool. Queensboro brother says, was it a kiddie pool that Wirfs jumped into? James says he was in an in-ground pool, 5 feet of water. It was sick. And he's saying that was Tristan Wirfs. And I'll buy that. I don't have any evidence to disprove or prove it otherwise. I will take your word for it. Not wanting to scan the internet now to find anything. Armand Duda says, I do love that we signed a fullback in Ricard. I always hated that the league has gone away from fullbacks. Armand, you know how I feel, right? You know. Come on. Half of the teams in the league have a fullback now. They are starting to kind of come a little bit more back into nouveau, just a little bit. He says, I don't hate Joe Shane either, says Armand Duda. He has made good picks and signings, and he brought the draft room into the 21st century. All right, let's see here. Armand says, the fans didn't talk about GMs as much 10 years ago. Social media has caused a lot of trends for fans to complain. You're not kidding. Social media is all about complaints and toxicity. Armand says you should have went with a different player to make it believable. Oh, he's talking about a nice rumor monger who decided that he wanted to post a fake trade on the chat. Whatever. Mark B says, Joe Shane has made business decisions that were detrimental to the team. He's let proven foundational core players leave on regular, and I know it's about money, but make it make sense. Armand Duda says, Illuminor is my favorite re-sign. Edmonds, my favorite signing. And I think I agree with you. Illuminor is my favorite re-signing. There's no doubt about that one. Is my favorite signing Edmonds or Likely? Probably Likely, but I could be convinced that it should be Edmonds. We'll see. Armand also says Giants win Super Bowl and all the fans say it's fooled gold. Mark B says, I like the Likely move a lot. I see. You see the pun there? Nice job. Can we see the screen to the tight end this season, please? Well, I already told you from the very get-go, I think before any of the writers wrote it, that remember, Likely is going to wind up with some of the Travis Kelce playbook because Travis Kelce plays slot tight end. He's been doing it for years. He has perfected it. And Matt Nagy was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City the last couple of years. Nagy is now the Giants offensive coordinator. Likely is going to see a ton of time at slot tight end, and he will be gobbling up chunks of the Travis Kelce playbook. Harlem X says, finally, Paul admits I'm nuts. Ha. Harlem X, you're a fun dude, and I appreciate the fact that you call us. And that right there justifies your presence on the program because you're a lot of fun, and that's what this program is supposed to be about. Entertainment as well as information. Mark B says Styles at 5. Absolutely understand that. I think that's a legitimate value pick at 5. Aiden Fink wants to thank Harlem X for calling. Says he needed it. Harlem X says, I try to walk away, but you guys keep dragging me back in. It's kind of like the mafia, Harlem X. Queensboro brother says, relax, Harlem X. You're not too much of a nutcase. You're all right, brother. Just don't become a delusional Jets fan. Harlem X says, I couldn't even spell Jets if I wanted to. Funny stuff, guys. Funny stuff. Now, he does say, however, he's still not familiar with Sonny Styles. He says, but I'm absolutely not getting excited from combine performances. Way too much bad history with workout warriors not living up to anything on the field. Yeah, you got to be very careful with the combine stuff. That's the underwear Olympics. Remember that. Armand Duda says nickel and dime corners get nickel and dimed. That is very true. Iman Perry says Sonny Styles. That's his guy. Harlem X says he forgot something on the call before. He wants to say, I just realized how much stuff I wanted to say but forgot. For guard, I think we should bring Kevin Zeitler back. Well, I have mentioned him not only on this program, I think, but also on Big Blue Kickoff Live. I am a Kevin Zeitler fan. He has already told people he wants to play at least another season. He did have a cup of coffee in Baltimore when John Harbaugh was there. Put all those things together. I don't know how much money he is going to require. But Kevin Zeitler is a gentleman who I would make a phone call to if I were sitting in the general manager's chair. You also mentioned we could find a rookie in the later rounds, and I understand. You know, whether it's Van Roten, whether it's a free agent like Zeitler, by the way, Wayne Teller, what did he get? $8 million a year to sign, I think, with Houston, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember. He just signed within the last 24, 36 hours. And obviously, you know, it was not nickels and dimes. He got more than that. And so I suspect he probably was a tad too pricey. I don't think the Giants, I think they're looking for a real good value signing. Someone who can hold the fort guy. Like I said, Parcells used to talk about. Van Roten's a hold the fort guy. I think Zeitler's a hold the fort guy. And I don't think Van Roten's going to cost very much. You probably get him back for close to the minimum for a year. I don't know what Zeitler's looking for these days. Of course, he's been in the league a long time, and he's made an awful lot of money already. So I don't know what kind of money he'd be looking for. Steven collects cards. I think that's a new one. And look, he's got the Mets rookie card there with Nolan Ryan on the board, and Jerry Kuzman. Man, talk about two terrific pitchers. One guy in the Hall of Fame, another guy who was probably in that next level down. Anyway, he says, hey, Paul, do you think there is a justification to take Jeremiah Love at 5? I personally don't. Again, I don't tell you what the Giants are going to do because I don't think it's fair. I'm not going to speculate. This Giants administration has been very tight-lipped about everything. I will say if it were me, I would not take Love at number 5. Again, I believe that, he is not Saquon Barkley. Barkley was such a special case. I believe he warranted the pick where he was at number 2. I believe that. I do not believe, that Love is in Barkley's class, so I could not forcibly push him up that high. The other thing I would say is that when you talk about running backs, if the guy is that special, and I mean that special, I look at him as a weapon, not as a running back. And I could force feed him up that high because he's a weapon, not just a running back. Barkley was worthy of the number 2 pick. I stand by it. I said it then, and I will say it now. I have no problem with the Barkley pick at 2. I don't think Love is close enough to Barkley that he makes it in the top 5 for me as a value pick. Strictly as a value pick, I don't think he's there. My opinion. Now, if you have someone in the NFL at one of the 32 teams who thinks he really is that good, if they think his grade is that close to Barkley or equal to Barkley, then you could justify the 5th pick because Barkley was a 2. You could justify Love as a 5 if you honestly believe his grade is that high. I don't think so. But that's just me. Armand Duda says we sure need depth at guard, no doubt. JDJ says Stout the punter may not be our best signing, but could have just as big of an impact as likely. We haven't had a punter who consistently flips the field since Jeff Fiegel's left, and that can be big in close games. That is true. Freedom 31 341 NYG. Good evening, Paul. I saw on Google that Mooney's drop rate is between 5 and 15. Explain. Go Giants. I had this conversation on Big Blue Kickoff Live the other day, and I looked at the numbers, and these are numbers that come from Sports Radar, which Pro Football Reference does like to use. That is their service. I consider them to be really good. I have my own qualifications for drops when I watch the film each and every Monday, and I go back over the Giants game and I grade the drops. I grade drops like a wide receiver coach would. I'm very, very harsh on receivers when they get 2 hands on the ball. If I think that ball should have been caught by a man who has professional skills, he's getting a drop for me. Okay? Now, Mooney last year had 5 drops on 32 receptions. That is a bit high, no question. Now, for his career, okay, he's at 4.8 for his drop percentage. All right? 4.8. That's not bad. That's okay. You can live with that. He did have 6 drops in 24 on 64 catches for 992 yards. Okay? Again, that's, I'm squirming a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I'm squirming a little bit. But back in 22 with the Bears, he only had 2 drops on 40 catches. So, his first year with the Bears, he had 1 drop on 61 catches. So he's kind of been inconsistent throughout his career with his hands. Some years he's been like glue. Other years he's had a little bit of a problem. I get it. To me, he's a solid number 2 wide receiver. Now, back in 21, when he caught 81 balls for over 1,000 yards, okay, he had 9 drops. It's a little bit much. Only caught 4 touchdown passes this year. If you're going to be a 1, you got to be higher than that. He did average 13 yards a catch, though. And, for his career, he is averaging 13 yards a grab. He is a legitimate number 2 receiver. So, am I a little bit concerned? Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the drops. But because he's been up and down through his career, I'm not overly concerned. If he consistently had drop after drop after drop, year after year after year, then I would say, I'd kind of be raising an eyebrow and wondering about the signing. But he has not been a habitual dropsies guy. It has more or less been sporadic. And that's a little bit less worrisome. Armand Duda says, always draft at least 1 offensive lineman a year. Good point. JDJ says, I don't understand why we let Kevin Zeitler leave in the first place. He was solid for us back then and is still decent now. You're correct. It was a salary cap issue, though. The Giants were really banged up against the cap, and they had no choice but to let Zeitler go. Armand Duda says, I wish we had a 3rd-round pick. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It would be really sweet. Dart was worth trading, but we hate to have only 2 top 100 picks. Well, that's the problem. You gave away your 3rd rounder this year to move up and get Dart. in the back end of the first round last year. So the Houston Texans now have that pick. So now you're picking at 37 overall, early second round, and you don't get to pick until after 100, early in the fourth round. That is a long time to wait. And there's a lot of good players. Make it 53-man roster players who are going to be gone in that third round, who absolutely could help the Giants. But you had to pay something to get something, and Jackson Dart was well worth it. Alman says, would rather pick at 5 than trade back, though. And I do think that's the right thing to do. Again, if you have conviction in a particular player, best player available at 5, you just take him. Don't jerk around. Joe Spano, 689, says there are several hold the fort guys at guard. I love the fact that you use the phrase, the Parcells phrase, which I have uttered so many times. Hold the fort guys. I love it. Way to go, Joe. He says that they won't hurt the Giants in the comp pick game that could come at a price the Giants could handle. GVR, of course. He mentions James Daniels, Graves Glasgow. I'll tell you what, Austin Corbett should be a very inexpensive hold the fort guy if you're looking for somebody at guard who is going to be on the less expensive side. Aiden Fink says, Paul, I don't know how the Giants consistently let their top players go because they don't have the money to pay them. Wan'Dale Robinson this year and reach their peak elsewhere. Well, it just so happens that free agency came up for a number of Giants players who had career years. Robinson had a career year. Flott had a career year. Illuminor had a career year. That's bad luck. When that happens, when you have 3 guys who are hitting unrestricted free agency coming off of career years, all 3 are going to want to get paid. That's a problem. Aiden says, wouldn't you think you'd have enough money to pay them in the New York market? Wan'Dale is going to reach his peak in Tennessee like Saquon and McKinney did and many other former Giants. It's not about the market. The salary cap doesn't play favorites with the market. It's part of the problem with the salary cap is you have states who have income tax. The NFL doesn't care. The salary cap is a hard cap across the board for all 32 teams. How is it fair that teams who are in states without state income tax, how is it fair that the Jets and Giants here in New Jersey, where there is a state income tax, how is it fair that the same contract offer they give a player that Tampa, Miami, or Jacksonville, they can give them the same contract offer and the player makes a bunch more money because he's not facing a state income tax? And for players who are going to prioritize those dollars, well, what do you think they're going to do? I have talked about this. You guys know how I feel about free agency, and you know how I feel about the salary cap. There should be a league adjustment made for teams that have state income taxes because the salary cap is not fair and it's not even across the board. Teams that play in states with income tax are suffering a hurdle, an extra detour sign, if you will, because it makes the value of their contracts decrease. Their offers are not as fruitful. Aiden says, I just hope this pattern doesn't continue. We have to keep replacing our best players because we can't pay them. Harlem X says, Aiden, that has always been a gripe for me with this team, always letting veterans and our best players go. Those same players blow up elsewhere, even the ones people call busts. Finally, K.O. Chris Olsen says, get Zeitler. And can we get a defensive tackle in the third round? The Giants don't have a third round pick, but they can probably get a backup nose or defensive tackle for that matter, but more or less a backup nose in the 4th round. There will be some players there that have a make it grade. Captain God says Slayton had more drops in one season than Mooney has had in his career, and we extended him. Yes, Slayton has had cases of the dropsies sprinkled throughout his career as well. There's no question about that. Absolutely. Aiden says, Paul is my hold the fort guy on Wednesday nights when I don't have plans. Captain God says, I'm thinking the G-men are back. Armand Duda says, Paul, build the fort. JDJ says, salary cap only plays favorites when it comes to the Eagles. Just kidding. Looks like they are finally paying for all those past big moves. Captain God says, salary cap should be adjusted for teams who reside in areas with state tax. And absolutely, no question about it. Armand Duda says, Wellington Mara to share TV revenue evenly amongst. Oh, yes, that is true. Mr. Mara made sure that TV revenue would be shared evenly among teams in the league instead of the biggest markets making the most. That is absolutely true. And it helps save the National Football League and allow it to grow. No question. He did what was best for the league. It was one of the most significant decisions and ideas that anyone in NFL history had. It was a critical maneuver by Mr. Mara to push that. And it is one of the core reasons why he belonged in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I was so glad that he finally eventually got inducted. Far too late, by the way, but they made him wait, but he got in, and I'm so grateful for that. Queensboro Brother says, Marlon Brando says, take Sonny at 5. Yeah, but just keep him away from the toll plazas at MetLife Stadium, okay? And finally, JDJ says, Paul, who do you think the Giants will play on opening day? I have absolutely no idea. I cannot even think about that. We are so far away. I got enough to worry about with free agency and the draft coming up in another month. Folks, that will do it for this edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We absolutely expect to be back your way next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, with another live edition of the program. We invite you to join us via chat, via phone call, or via video call. Unless news warrants, we'll be back Wednesday night. If news warrants that we have to come back earlier because the Giants made a huge transaction, well, then we will try to come back earlier. In the meantime, I thank all of you for being here once again and joining us on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. And we offer our greatest appreciation to Daryl Ruiter of 92.3 FM, The Fan in Cleveland, Browns insider, beat reporter for nearly 20 years. Tremendous information about Greg Newsome Jr., the veteran corner who has signed a one-year deal with the Giants. If you missed any portion of the interview with Daryl and need to find out more about Greg Newsome, we ran the first portion of the interview 15 minutes into the program and came back with Daryl 45 minutes into the program for part 2 of the interview. That will do it for this edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Once again, get all of your Giants coverage at nygiantsonsi.com. I'm Paul Dottino. So long, everybody.